I'll never forget that day. I was attending a high school in a small semi-rural town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other. You didn't have to be friends with everyone, but at the very least you recognized people's faces and knew their names. Our entire graduating class had fewer than 200 students. When you walked through the halls, even if you weren't close to someone, you'd still nod at them or say hello. It was a very quiet school. Major rumors rarely spread beyond a couple of classrooms, and serious incidents almost never happened. The story I'm about to tell happened during my sophomore year when I was around 16 years old. It was a Wednesday in early fall. The air carried that first hint of winter coming from the fields and woods behind the school. I remember that detail clearly because I was standing near my locker, putting away my bag, when I noticed a boy staring toward the small wooded area behind the football field. His name was Majid. He was a very quiet and reserved kid. Not strange or frightening, he simply didn't talk unless someone spoke to him first. Most of us knew who he was, but almost nobody actually spent time with him. That morning began like any other. By fourth period, we were sitting in world history class. Mr. Ahmed had just started teaching a lesson about major wars. The classroom was quiet except for a few students whispering to each other. I was sitting near the back beside the window, half paying attention to the lesson and half doodling in my notebook. Then suddenly the school speakers came on. Attention staff and students. We are currently in a security lockdown. This is not a drill. Lock your doors, turn off the lights, and move immediately to your designated safe areas. At first, several students laughed. They thought it was one of those false alarms that sometimes happened at the beginning of the school year. But within seconds, we saw the fear on Mr. Ahmed's face. He didn't laugh. He didn't roll his eyes the way he usually did during practice drills. He looked directly at us and said quickly, "Everyone under your desks. Now." Within seconds, the entire classroom moved. Chairs scraped across the floor. Bags were pushed against the door to make it harder for anyone to enter. I crawled underneath my desk. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I tried not to make a sound. Whispers spread throughout the room. What's happening? Did someone actually enter the school? Our school was small, only 2 floors. The gym was on one side and the library was on the other. Security was decent, but the school wasn't completely isolated. The woods were nearby and the main road wasn't far away. Over the years, rumors had occasionally spread about strangers entering the grounds during the summer, but nothing had ever actually happened. The first few minutes were terrifying in a way that's difficult to describe. Everything was silent except for distant police sirens that slowly seemed to get closer. Then we heard something outside our classroom. Footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps moving down the hallway. Someone was walking outside. It sounded like they were testing the classroom doors one by one, pulling on the handles to see if any of them were unlocked. A few moments later, we heard 3 slow knocks. Then a man's voice spoke from outside. "Don't be afraid, it's only a drill." The entire classroom froze. Mr. Ahmed immediately signaled for us not to move. I could hear students breathing harder from fear. The person outside began shaking the doorknob, trying to force the door open. Then he raised his voice. "Open the door, everything is fine. It's just a drill." At that moment, I realized something terrifying. He clearly knew this wasn't a drill. He was trying to trick us. Several long minutes passed. The knocking stopped, but the footsteps continued. We heard them move toward the classroom next to ours. Somewhere farther away in the school, we heard muffled voices. Maybe it was a teacher trying to calm students. Maybe someone was panicking. Then suddenly we heard a scream. It wasn't a long, hysterical scream. It was short, sharp. The kind of scream that comes from genuine fear. My stomach immediately dropped. That was the moment I realized this was real. We stayed underneath our desks for what felt like hours. In reality, it was probably around 40 minutes. The police sirens kept getting closer and louder. Then the school speakers turned on again. This time it was the principal. He was speaking calmly, but the fear in his voice was obvious. "The police have arrived on campus. Continue the lockdown procedures. Do not leave your classrooms and do not open the door for anyone except law enforcement officers." I tried to calm myself down, but my mind was racing. Who was inside the school? Why were they here? Sitting at the desk beside me was Majed, the quiet boy I had seen earlier that morning. I could see his hands shaking underneath the desk. I wanted to say something to comfort him, but I was too afraid to even move. Suddenly we heard the sound of metal scraping against the floor. Very carefully, I lifted my head just enough to see the classroom door handle moving. Someone was trying to open the door again. then we heard the same voice we had heard earlier. "Please open the door. I won't hurt anyone." I looked toward Majed and whispered, "Do you know who that is?" He looked back at me with terrified eyes. He slowly shook his head and said in a broken voice, "No, I didn't do it." At first, I didn't understand what he meant. But then I remembered seeing him that morning standing near the wood, staring at something or someone in a very strange way. At that moment, I felt my stomach drop. Could it be him? I didn't want to believe it. Majid was quiet and somewhat withdrawn, but in an innocent way. He had never seemed violent, but the way he looked at that moment frightened me. His body was tense. His eyes kept moving toward the door as if he was waiting for something to happen. Eventually, we heard police officers outside the building. There were voices, commands being shouted, and sounds coming from the hallways. After what felt like forever, the doorknob finally stopped moving. A short time later, the principal made another announcement. "The lockdown has ended. Police have secured the situation. No students have been injured." That was the first moment I felt like I could finally breathe again. When the doors were opened, students were released in small groups. Teachers checked everyone's identities while police officers moved carefully through the hallways. That's when I saw Majid. He was walking between two police officers. He wasn't resisting, he wasn't speaking. His face was pale and completely empty of emotion. Later, we learned the truth. Majid had come to school that day carrying several knives inside his backpack. He intended to confront a group of older students who had been bullying him since his first year at the school. Rumors spread that he wanted to scare them and possibly hurt some of them. But when he realized the police had arrived, he panicked and hid inside a storage room until officers found him. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. The lockdown had prevented something terrible from happening, but I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that he had been sitting right beside me under those desks. The fear on his face had been real. Part of me felt guilty. How had I missed the warning signs? Why hadn't I asked if he was okay? Why hadn't I noticed that he had become even more isolated than usual? At the same time, another part of me was terrified. If things had gone differently, I could have been one of the people who got hurt. Any of us could have. A few weeks later, Majid was placed in a juvenile detention center. The school held meetings about bullying and mental health. I remember looking around at my classmates and realizing how little we truly know about the people around us. How can someone so quiet, so invisible, carry so much pain and anger inside that they begin planning something so dangerous without anyone noticing until the last possible moment? I thought about Majid many times after that. I don't know where he is now. I hope he received the help he needed. I hope he no longer carries those thoughts. But even today, whenever I remember that day, the footsteps in the hallway, the slow knocks on the door, the scream we heard in the distance, and the sound of police sirens outside, I can still feel my chest tighten. That day taught me a lesson I will never forget. You never truly know the burden another person is carrying. You never know what thoughts they hide behind their silence. And sometimes, even in a small town inside a school where everyone seems familiar, danger can quietly find its way in. The danger had remained almost invisible until it became impossible to ignore. Even now, whenever I drive past my old school, I think about the windows of that classroom. I remember sitting under that desk, feeling completely helpless, knowing that someone inside the building had intentions that nobody truly understood. I think about Majid. I think about all those tiny moments that seemed completely normal at the time but somehow led to that day. Sometimes I ask myself how close we really came to losing everything we thought was safe and ordinary. I had always believed substitute teachers were people who appeared for a day or two and then disappeared again. The kind of people whose faces you could barely remember the following week. That's why it felt so unsettling when Mr. Kazem arrived at our school during my final year of high school. It was a gloomy Thursday morning. The sky was completely gray and the hallways smelled like wet jackets and cafeteria fries. Our regular teacher was sick, so the principal had called in a substitute teacher at the last minute. His name was Mr. Kazem. He was older than most substitute teachers, probably somewhere in his mid-40s. His hair was thin, and his narrow metal glasses reflected the white classroom lights. The first thing I noticed was that he never smiled. Not even once. He introduced himself quietly and began taking attendance. At first, nothing seemed strange, but after a while, I started feeling like he was paying special attention to me. When he said my name, he paused for an unusually long moment. It wasn't just a quick glance. He stared at me as if he was studying me, trying to understand everything about me. The class continued, and I tried to ignore the feeling, but his attention never shifted away. He only asked me questions, no one else. Every answer I gave made him slowly nod his head as if he were memorizing every word. By the end of the class, I felt watched. Not in a normal way. There was something much deeper and unsettling about it. The next day, he was assigned to our English class. That's when things became worse. He wasn't simply watching me anymore. It felt as if he had been waiting for me. I arrived a few minutes late because my locker had become stuck and wouldn't open. When I walked into the classroom, he was already standing beside my desk, leaning against the wall. I froze. He didn't say anything at first. He simply tilted his head slightly while looking directly at me. For a moment, it felt as though the entire classroom had gone silent. Then he quietly said, "I'm glad you could join us." His voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow everyone in the room heard it. I answered with a few words and sat down, feeling my stomach twist into knots. My friends noticed that I looked pale. Several of them asked whether I was okay, but I couldn't explain it. Honestly, I didn't even understand the feeling myself. Over the following week, things became increasingly disturbing. Mr. Kazem always seemed to be wherever I went. If I stopped in the hallway, he would be standing nearby pretending to read a notice board or examine some papers, but it always felt as though he was waiting to see me. I started avoiding the cafeteria, the library, and even certain hallways during breaks. It didn't matter. He always seemed to find me. Then the notes started appearing. Small pieces of paper left on my desk or inside my notebook. I never saw anyone place them there. At first, they weren't direct threats, but they were deeply unsettling. One note said, "I noticed you." Another said, "I remember everything you say." A third read, "You can't hide from me." And another simply said, "I'm always here." I took the notes to the principal. He dismissed the situation. He said substitute teachers sometimes tried to connect with students in unusual ways, and didn't seem to believe it was a serious issue. But by the middle of the week, I had realized the truth. Mr. Kazem wasn't trying to connect with me. He was obsessed with me. By Thursday morning, the situation had become frightening. Mr. Kazem had been assigned to supervise the chemistry lab. Normally, I enjoyed practical classes, but that day I felt nervous the entire time. As I prepared a chemical solution, I kept glancing toward him. I kept looking toward the door, and every time I did, he was standing there. He wasn't helping anyone, he wasn't supervising the class. He was simply standing there watching me. His lips were pressed together in the same expression he always wore, and his eyes followed every movement I made. I tried to focus on the experiment, but the feeling of being watched was stronger than anything else. Every time I moved, he would take a small step, making sure he could still see me. Then during the experiment, a small chemical spill happened near the edge of the table. I instinctively jumped back, but he moved with an unnatural speed, much faster than necessary, almost as if he had been waiting for that exact moment. Then he calmly said, "Be careful. We certainly don't want anyone getting hurt." That sentence sent chills through my entire body. He wasn't warning me. He was showing me that he was in control. By lunchtime, rumors had started spreading. Several students had noticed that he followed me from class to class. Others claimed they had seen him writing notes about students and teachers in a small notebook. I stayed quiet because I was afraid that saying anything would only make the situation worse. Then, during third period, the school suddenly went into lockdown. I was doing my assignment when the speakers came on and announced the emergency. The classroom immediately erupted into panic. Papers fell onto the floor. Students rushed to find places to hide. The teacher dragged a heavy desk against the door, turned off the lights, and closed the blinds. We gathered together in the corner of the classroom, trying not to make a sound. A few minutes later, we heard knocking on the door. The moment I heard the voice, I recognized it. It was Mr. Kazem. He was knocking and demanding that we open the door. Our teacher motioned for us to stay completely silent. Nobody moved. The knocking continued. Then we heard the doorknob turning. He wasn't trying to break the door down yet, but he was sending a clear message. He could try to enter whenever he wanted. We remained hidden for what felt like an eternity. After some time, we began hearing voices in the hallway. It sounded like police officers moving quickly through the building, telling students to stay where they were. A few moments later, the doorknob moved one final time. Then we heard footsteps walking away from the classroom. The lockdown lasted nearly an hour. When the doors finally opened, armed police officers and emergency teams entered the building. But Mr. Kazim was gone. Outside, police cars filled the street while students were escorted outside in small groups to a safe area. Later, we learned the truth. Police arrested him at a nearby hotel. Inside his vehicle, they discovered surveillance equipment, tracking devices, and detailed files containing notes about both students and teachers. They also found a bag containing various tools, although authorities never publicly explained exactly what those items were. Investigators said he had apparently planned to use the lockdown to isolate certain students inside specific classrooms. Maybe he only wanted to watch them, or perhaps he intended to do something much worse. No one ever learned the full truth. Even months later, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching me. Mr. Kazem is now in prison, but I often think about how carefully he planned everything, how he studied the students, how he learned their routines, habits, and daily movements, and how easily the situation could have turned into a real tragedy. Since then, I've never trusted substitute teachers the same way again. Even a teacher being absent for a single day would make me anxious. Every unfamiliar face reminded me of Mr. Kazim, his calm, obsessive stare, his quiet, patient voice, and the terrifying moment when I realized that the person who was supposed to protect you and look after your safety might actually be the one watching you and wanting to hurt you. I want to tell you about my neighbor who suffered from a severe mental illness. I'll call her Camellia to protect her privacy, because I don't want to describe her as crazy or use language that contributes to the stigma surrounding mental health. This story isn't exaggerated to make it frightening or dramatic. These are simply the events that actually happened. The story took place in another city. It began when my parents started finding small pills scattered throughout our backyard near the fence. A few pills here, a few pills there. We used Google to figure out what they were. We eventually figured out what kind of medication they were by searching the numbers printed on the pills. Most of them appeared to be antidepressants, although I don't remember the exact names because all of this happened about a year ago. At least one of the medications seemed to be used for Alzheimer's disease, according to Google. We were all confused. But what worried us the most was the possibility that our dog might eat the pills before we found them. The situation continued for several weeks. Then we started finding unopened bottles of water scattered around our backyard. The side of the yard where these things kept appearing faced an empty lot beside our house. A new house was being built there, but construction workers obviously wouldn't throw sealed water bottles into someone's backyard. For some context, Camellia lived several houses away from us, roughly in the middle of the street. Between our house and hers were two empty lots, one of which was where the new house was being built. About a week later, the arguments began. Or maybe incidents would be a better word. Camellia would suddenly leave her house and start screaming at the construction workers. I never knew exactly why. People said her reasons rarely made any sense. Sometimes she would stand in her own yard yelling. Other times she would walk directly onto the construction site and scream at the workers. Many people even saw her arguing when nobody else was there. She would stand in the middle of the empty lot or walk among the construction equipment, talking and shouting to herself. By that point, most people on our street knew who she was and were afraid of her. Personally, I hadn't met her because I attended a university about an hour away from home, and usually only came back on weekends. One weekend, my parents left me home alone around noon. I think they had gone to the gym or the grocery store. I'm an only child, and I had just gotten out of the shower when I heard someone yelling outside. I looked through the window and saw a blonde woman in her 50s arguing with someone. I couldn't see the person she was talking to, but I could hear a man's voice responding. At the time, I had never met Camellia. I also hadn't met the new neighbors building the house. My parents had met them, though, so I assumed the woman and the new neighbors were arguing about the construction. After a while, the woman left. Then a man and his wife came out of the unfinished house and got into their car. I was confused, especially when the man walked toward our front door and rang the bell. I'm a very introverted person, so I decided not to answer. Looking back, I know that probably wasn't the smartest decision, but my parents weren't home, and I assumed it wasn't important. About a minute later, he returned to his car. From the window, I saw him doing something inside the vehicle. Then he came back and left a piece of paper on our front door. After he and his wife drove away, I picked up the note and read it. It explained that the neighbors had been looking at their new house when they saw Camellia attempting to enter our backyard. They confronted her, which was the argument I had heard. I quickly took a picture of the note and sent it to my mother. I called her as well. She didn't seem overly worried, but I was terrified. We usually left the back door unlocked during the day. If Camelia had managed to get through the backyard gate, she could have easily entered the house while I was alone inside. After that incident, my father installed new locks on the small gates at the front of the house. But the strange behavior continued. Camelia kept trying to enter our backyard. She continued throwing pills and water bottles over the fence. Sometimes we would find her digging through our flower beds. One incident in particular frightened my parents more than anything else. There was a narrow alley behind our house that connected all the neighborhood garages. One of the neighbors who lived on the opposite side of the alley called my parents and told them that she had seen Camelia standing near our back gate at around 3 o'clock in the morning. We never understood why the neighbors happened to be awake at that hour, but they said Camelia was simply standing in the middle of the alley, staring at our back fence without moving. She wasn't moving, she was simply standing there. The idea that someone was watching our house in the middle of the night like that was absolutely terrifying. The man who built our house, I'll call him Jad, somehow managed to contact people who knew Camelia's family very well. Everyone wanted to understand why she was behaving this way. Since Jad had built many of the houses in our neighborhood and was well known in the area, people often came to him with questions. I believe he knew the realtor who had sold the house to Camelia, although I'm not completely sure. Eventually, Jad was able to learn a lot about her. It turned out that her family was extremely wealthy. They owned a major company, supposedly one of the largest companies in the United States, although I won't mention its name out of respect for her privacy. More importantly, her family had left her alone in that house because they no longer wanted to deal with her mental illness. The most important detail, however, was that her only son had died from a drug overdose 2 years earlier. After his death, her mental health completely collapsed. The reason she kept trying to enter our backyard and throw things over the fence was because she believed her son was somehow inside our house. Nobody knew exactly what she believed. Maybe she thought we had taken him. Maybe she believed his spirit was there. No one really understood, but it finally explained her behavior. We also learned that she had spent much of her life in psychiatric hospitals. At some point, she had stopped taking her medication, which explained why we kept finding pills scattered around our yard. Then in January 2020, things became extremely serious. During one of her usual confrontations with the construction workers, she pulled out a gun. She had already been very aggressive, but the weapon made the situation far more dangerous. I don't know whether she simply threatened them or actually fired the gun. Either way, the neighbors called the police. It took a long time before officers were able to calm her down. The entire street was filled with police officers carrying weapons. I'm extremely grateful that my parents had been keeping track of the police reports. When the officers arrived, they already knew about Camelia's history of mental illness. Honestly, I was both relieved and surprised by the way they handled the situation. Not every police department receives proper training for dealing with people suffering from severe mental illness, especially individuals experiencing dementia or Alzheimer's-related episodes. I still have security camera footage from our house showing officers standing outside with their weapons while trying to calm her down and bring the situation under control. At one point, I considered sharing the videos as proof, but I don't think that's necessary. After that incident, Camelia disappeared for a very long time. We later heard that she had spent several months in a psychiatric hospital. Eventually, she returned to the neighborhood. The strange thing was that she seemed much better. She stopped all of the behaviors that had frightened everyone for so long. Almost every day, my family and I see her walking her dog in front of our house. She appears to follow a steady and consistent routine. And honestly, I'm genuinely happy for her. After everything that happened, seeing her finally receive help and find some stability is something I never expected. The fear we felt back then was real, but now when I see her quietly walking her dog, I mostly feel relief. I hope she continues getting the help she needs, and I hope she finally finds some peace.